borrowed from service providers. And most of those service providers are outside Kenya. And I happen to have interacted in one of the countries, I will not name it. Some suppliers are almost shaming Kenya. So I think that area you need to work seriously and maybe make sure that you pay those suppliers, because the image of a country depends very much on how you relate with other countries.
Vice Chair, but it goes without saying that will be Germany.
Thank you. PCS and your team, I can see there's a reallocation of 466 to the state protocol sub-program, and that money you took it from Kenya missions abroad, 258, and 208 from international relations and cooperation sub-programs. Of course, it is allowed in the PFM Act to do that allocation. But what we are asking is, looks like there was no justification for this. And equally, there is no evidence of approval by the accounting officers and the National Treasury. Can you provide a proof of that communication by National Treasury for the approvals of the reallocations?
May I respond?
I'll ask Mr. Aloy to respond to the last two questions. But if you allow me to speak to the question that has been posed by Honorable Amisi, I think that's a very important question. The fact that the ministry doesn't build roads, it doesn't drill dams, it doesn't build schools. Sometimes demonstrating its utility can appear difficult. And yet, Chair, you know that this ministry, it is through this ministry that a lot of, number one, investments come to Kenya. And then number two, it's also through that a great deal of development cooperation resources come to Kenya that go into quite a great deal of social as well as productive sectors. But I want to therefore appreciate what Honorable Amisi raises in terms of how we better present this so that it can tell the story of what we are doing. The way the budget is structured, or the way budget performance is structured, is that it's really focused on the enablers. What are those enablers that facilitate the State Department to be able to do exactly what you have said, which is, to drive the economic diplomacy agenda, to drive the peace agenda, etc., etc. What you require then is functional missions, for example, as one infrastructure. Effective, efficient missions must be there. Secondly, you need people, the human resource itself, and so the P&E story is part of that story, because without people, without the human capital, you cannot be able to drive that agenda. But having said that, we make an attempt in Annex 1A, Chair. Annex 1A includes the program and sub-program performance report for what is called non-financial, for the 12 months of financial year 2023. In that annex, you are able to see in more granular forms, Honorable Hamisi, the kind of specific engagements. And it is possible for us to be able to indicate in terms of shillings and cents how much was spent with regard to each of these activities. And so I want to perhaps refer the committee again to Annex 1A, where clarity is provided in granular form about the specifics of our activities. But permit me, Chair, then to ask Mr. Aloy to respond to the last two very, very important questions. Thank you.
thank you again for giving me the chance. The first one on the borrowing, the pending bills. It's true, part of our pending bills are in the Kenyan missions, but there are arrangements to have the same sorted as we release the monies in form of AIEs. There's a requirement that pending bills form first charge of the preceding year's budget, so they have been requested to give them priority. Number two, on the reallocations, if I may draw your attention to Annex 1E, you'll be able to see that there's a letter that we wrote forwarding the reallocation proposals to the Treasury and indicating the details of each item. We did not attach the actual letter, but because we had incorporated the same in the supplementary estimates number 2, we thought that by giving you the estimates themselves, that would be adequate. But we can send that the letter is in the office. We can, if you allow us, you can bring.
We have authority.
Yes, we have authority. The Treasury gave us written authority. Yeah. Okay. We'll do the same thing.
I think we proceed to Diaspora with your permission. Yes, you can do it in 15 minutes. You have a very small budget anyway, so.
Shots fired. Thank you, Chair, and members. Good morning. Thank you once again for the opportunity to make our submission to this committee on the budget implementation for the financial year of 2023-2024. The financial performance by vote and program in that year, the State Department was allocated an approved budget of 1.3 billion in the recurrent vote, which was revised downwards to 1.8 in the supplementary 2. The reduction on the recurrent vote amounting to 127 million targeted personnel emoluments, salaries and allowances. The financial year budget was expended under the following 1 program and 4 sub-programs. And in our submission, we've broken down the programs being Diaspora Economic and Commercial and Cultural Affairs, Management of Consular Services, Diaspora Interest Abroad, and of course, General Administration, Planning and Support Services. And we've broken down in our submission what was the approved budget, what was the revised budget, and the change in estimates that shows the 127 million that I have described. In that year, the actual exchequer releases were 997,202,826, and the State Department received that from the National Treasury, which translates to about 84% of our total revised budget. The actual expenditure by vote and programs is also outlined in section 1.2. And we explain the reason for the variance in the absorption rate in respect to that financial year. And a number of these challenges really have to do with the newness of the department or the setup that was required in that particular year, including things like late activation of IFMIS and delays and administrative and transition challenges, particularly that affected or that hindered our ability to post officers to selected missions abroad, and so on. And that is why you will see that the major element of reallocation is actually under PE, because that is the element that was mostly that was mostly affected. As far as non-financial performance is concerned, would like to state as follows, and you will find this information better outlined in Annex 1. A number of achievements were undertaken or were realized by the State Department for the period under review, including evacuation of distressed Kenyans from various countries, 1,170 distressed Kenyans from Sudan, following the outbreak of political crisis in April of 2023. 107 victims of human trafficking evacuated from Laos and Myanmar, and 1 from Albania. The State Department also evacuated a total of 159 Kenyans from different places, including Lebanon, Israel, Malaysia, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Tanzania, Qatar, the USA, South Africa, India, Switzerland, Sierra Leone, and Jordan. In total, I'd also like to mention that the State Department facilitated the repatriation of mortal remains of 74 diasporians who died in various countries, including Spain, the UK, Zanzibar, the UAE, South Africa, Australia, Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Spain, in that period. We also developed evacuation and repatriation guidelines to better support that, and have been able now to operationalize a 24-hour response center to support the evacuation process that is actually currently operational to support the evacuation from Lebanon that we are currently speaking to. And Chair, if you allow, Waziri would like to make a short statement concerning Lebanon when I am done with this presentation. Continuing on non-financial performance on consular services, we facilitated, our mobile consular services were offered in that year to 46 countries around the world, serving tens of thousands of Kenyans, facilitating, the provision of ID cards, passports, birth certificates, citizenship, application for citizenship, document attestation, declaration of dual citizenship, and so on. The State Department conducted a baseline survey to facilitate and create diaspora offices and safe houses. And this is something we have discussed with this committee a number of times. And of course, we were unable to operationalize those safe houses, even though all the paperwork is done because of the lack of budget. I'd like to underscore that this continues to be a critical part and something we still urgently need to be able to support and champion the protection of Kenyans in the diaspora, particularly in places such as Thailand, where we have a serious crisis of human trafficking, and so on. Strategic diaspora engagements were held with Kenyans during high-level visits among many places, including Maputo, Ottawa, Dublin, Gaborone, Brussels, Berlin, Kigali, Helsinki, Muscat, Bujumbura, Doha, Washington, D.C., London, Canberra, Havana, Addis Ababa, and other places. And this is a critical part, and perhaps to speak to Mheshimiwa's question about how the foreign policy actually touches everyday lives. It is in the diaspora engagements that our ministry is able to touch and feel and deal with everyday people. Harnessing investment opportunities. In that year, also the State Department for Diaspora Affairs mounted the Diaspora Investment Conference, or the KICC, where almost 3,000 participants attended. And after that, Diaspora Tech Investment Expo was held in Atlanta, Georgia. That was graced by His Excellency the President, bringing together about 1,500 diasporians. Further, the State Department participated in the Homa Bay International Investment Conference in February of 2024. In terms of facilitating international jobs for Kenyans, the State Department led negotiations on a comprehensive migration and mobility agreement with Germany, which has now in this financial year been signed, and also supported and led negotiations, including with the State of Qatar, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Poland, Austria, where an MOU was signed on the margins of UNGA, Canada, the UK, and Ireland. State Department also facilitated the establishment of the Pearson View Professional Test Center, as well as Redicare Staffing Limited, which are part of the infrastructure that we are working on to facilitate the movement of talent from Kenya to other parts of the world. The State Department also conducted 2 diaspora job fairs in that year in Meru and in Embu, bringing together about 9,395 Kenyans who are sensitized on labor migration processes. Chair, you're aware that in this year we also did a big job fair in Vihiga, and the process is ongoing. Global labor market strategy, together with the State Department for Labor and Skills Development, was also created to harmonize government's response to the global labor market and to facilitate Kenyan talent joining and thriving in the global labor market. We have done work on publicity and awareness creation through various media engagements, awareness creation on migrant workers, particularly through working with Ngao officers, with religious leaders, and so on labor migration. We've done this in Mombasa, and we've done this in other counties as well. Chair, I'd like to also note that in the year that we are discussing, remittances went up, and a lot of work has been done to support that, including working with the CBK to launch the DAO CSD, an online application that facilitates Kenyans in the diaspora and really anybody to invest in government securities from the comfort of their phone. And in 2023, remittances rose to 4.18 billion. And this year, we are tracking also what we expect will be a higher number than that, closer to the 4.9 billion by the end of this year. US dollars, yes, 4.9 billion USD. The diaspora mainstreamed international development, which is a critical part of our mandate. We did a number of things, including holding virtual public participation meetings with the Kenyan diaspora in line with our constitution on tax, on the Labor Migration Management Bill, on the draft diaspora policy, and the Diaspora Council Bill, and on the recently launched State Department for Diaspora Affairs strategic plan. And I want to thank the Deputy Chair for joining us for that illustrious launch 2 weeks ago. We've also provided counseling services, and we might be the only department that does this, provided counseling services both to our diaspora as well as to their families when they come for support at the State Department. In that year, we supported 174 Kenyans with, distressed Kenyans with counseling services. We've also prepared a Kenya Diaspora Mental Wellness Action Plan that is currently being rolled out, and that works to support not just the mental wellness of diaspora, but also of our own teams. Under the policy, legal, and institutional strengthening, we've reviewed our Diaspora Policy 2014 and developed a draft Diaspora Policy 2024. And perhaps my Waziri will speak a little bit to the plans we have as far as the diaspora and foreign policy and the work that we think this committee can support us in doing. We've built capacity of our officers. 54 officers went for training, internship and youth opportunities. We were able to offer 67 youth internship and 19 industrial attachment. On digitalization of government services, 9 citizen-centered services were digitized and can now be accessed on the eCitizen platform. In terms of challenges, a number of these exist, including what we are seeing as evolving global conflict and insecurity that continue to threaten in a big way the Kenyan diaspora, particularly those in spaces such as the Middle East. Human trafficking is a real challenge that is affecting our diaspora, and it is an urgent need for us as a country to be able to address. One of the other challenges we had was we received an expanded mandate in that year, from a 3-point mandate to a 6-point mandate, including the formation of the Diaspora Placement Agency under the Executive Order 2 of 2023, but that expanded mandate did not come with expanded budget, so we have really struggled as far as lack of funds, both to operationalize the DPA, as I mentioned, the safe houses, and diaspora offices, or setup of our offices within the missions. On your question about project information, the State Department did not have any capital or development project in the year under review. I think you had also asked us a question about the breakdown of budgeted personnel emoluments against the actual. We've provided that on number 5, which explains that a total of 97,272,445 million was utilized as PE for the period ending 30th June 2024. And we've broken down that, including the variance. The State Department did not have an operational semi-autonomous government agency in the period under review. But as I have mentioned, we are in the process of operationalizing the Diaspora Placement Agency, but haven't received any funding to operationalize that. But we are, in good startup fashion, bootstrapping the agency. On reallocation and pending payments in that year, the State Department proposed reallocations amounting to 52 million, which was regularized in Supplementary 2 to cater for the following priority areas. That was to finish the refurbishment of our office now at Old Mutual Building. The justification was to avoid civil litigation on the ongoing contract. We also moved funds for fuel of vehicles to cater for the new fleet of vehicles that had been acquired in that year and to maintain the same vehicles, and that is how the 52 million was utilized. The State Department has pending bills of 177 million as at 30th June 24 for goods and services that were rendered in that year. These bills have been subjected to a pending bills verification committee, both by the internal auditor and the committee to enable payment, which of course is required as fast charge. Chair, I submit.
You were, PCS, you want to say something? Regard.
the way it is captured within treasury terms is considered foreign travel, even though it is really an evacuation, whether it be of mortal remains or of persons who are distressed. We do have an evacuation budget line. I will, if you allow, get back to you in terms of the figure of exactly how much we spent last year as far as evacuations are concerned, and furnish the House with that figure. Moving on to Mheshimiwa Hamisi's question, I think it was really a question for both myself and for P.S. Singoe. I will speak perhaps to agree with you that diaspora diplomacy is a critical part of not just of the foreign policy of this country, but a critical part of the national development agenda and national development process of this country. I've indicated that 4.1 billion, 4.19, almost 4.2 billion in remittances last year came from small ticket items, quite unstructured. But that is larger, as you know, than tea, coffee, horticulture, tourism, foreign exchange earnings. And there is real potential for us to do much, much more, not just with remittances, but also with remittances for investment. We now have a zero-draft diaspora investment strategy that really looks at structuring and galvanizing diaspora investment, finding out things like what is it that causes diaspora not to invest, and what can we do as GOK to better structure that. We are also in the early stages, and perhaps Waziri might also want to say more about that, but we're also in the early stages of working on a diaspora bond that then would also galvanize remittances for investment. Beyond that, Mheshimiwa, we have now about 4 million Kenyans living abroad, and with the labor migration, and I didn't answer with your questions, the labor migration work that we are doing, that number is rising steadily. So indeed, I agree with you that we need to allocate more resources to diaspora. This year, as you're aware, we only have in our budget 600 million to serve the 4 million Kenyans, including the things like evacuating from Lebanon and so on. It is really an unsustainable way of doing business. So we need to put money in diaspora. I will, however, so the State Department of Foreign Affairs, of course, is mandated both to carry out, to enforce, and to work out this country's foreign policy. So I will allow the rest of that question to be answered by my brother Singoe, who I'm sure will also speak about the ongoing work currently within Kenya's current foreign policy revision. Allow me to jump back to the question by Honorable Abdikader, and I'll link it up to the other question by Mheshimiwa Ikana in terms of jobs facilitated. Now, the work that government does is creating an enabling infrastructure. A lot of labor migration happens in terms of private sector to private sector. So because we have negotiated an agreement with Germany, for example, then we expect to see more people using private means, finding opportunities in Germany and moving there. I think it's important to clarify that the way this is expected to work out is not that after you've signed an agreement with country X, that then Kenyans are going to be put in transport and moved there, which is sometimes, what people we have heard from Kenyans that is expected. So there is that. However, I can say this: the numbers we have from immigration indicate that from the beginning of this administration to about July of 2024, about 180,000 Kenyans had left the country for job opportunities abroad. So 180,000 is a good number to think about in terms of what was done between September or October 2022 and July of 2024. Now to respond to the questions from Mheshimiwa Ikana, what are we doing in terms of raising awareness or creating, giving information to Kenyans to understand how these kazi majuu can be accessed? We've done a number of things. We've been heavily involved in media conversations. We've explained on radio, on TV, on newspapers and so on about how Kenyans can begin to access that information. We've also put out a lot of that information in our various media, whether it be the State Department's of Diaspora social media pages, as well as our websites, whether that is the diaspora.go.ke or the Diaspora Placement Agency's website, which is dpa.go.ke. A really important intervention has been the job fairs, which have been done in a number of counties, and funding allowing, we'll be able to do in even more counties, where in the job fairs we will ideally have government actors who work in the labor migration space. We will bring information about immigration, about visas. We will have the National Employment Authority that regulates the various private recruitment agencies. We'll bring on board private recruitment agencies who have job opportunities, and they will usually interview people on the spot. So in that way, we have found that the interaction with people on the ground with these opportunities, but also opportunities for us to do some myth busting, to give information, to answer questions, has been a really, really important part of that. We've created materials around the various projects or programs that exist. And that material has been circulated again through our various social media. For example, after the signing of the German migration agreement, we issued an explainer, and then after that, a job fair by the Germans was held, and so on. So we are communicating. We think that there is an opportunity to do more in terms of engaging, particularly this committee and our Committee on Diaspora Affairs, to bring you up to speed in terms of what the opportunities are, and to really ask you to get the information to Kenyans. Yes, the State Department has a counseling services unit. We are one of very few, but it exists within our establishment, and we have on board counselors who support our staff as well as clients, both in the diaspora as well as their families. Some of the things that the counseling unit does is it accompanies families when they go to meet the bodies of their repatriated family or friends when they arrive at the airport. We offer support and counseling services to evacuees when they return. For example, in the returnees from Lebanon, we will usually meet them with a counseling team, and people are taken through some psychosocial counseling. On the third question, yes, labor migration is a shared mandate between ourselves, the State Department for Labor, and that is how we actually created the global labor market strategy together. Other actors who are very involved in that also include, State Department for TVET, for example, Foreign Affairs, Immigration, and so on. Are there some overlaps? There might be, because again, the mandates is a shared mandate. So we are currently working out with the State Department for Labor to see how we could better structure that work so that you have more synergy as opposed to clashes. One of the ways you could facilitate, or this committee could help us, is we now have the Diaspora Placement Agency, whose job is to secure placement for Kenyans abroad. In certain cases, other governments or actors across another country might not want to work with private recruiters for whatever reason. They might want to recruit directly using a government agency, or they might want to work directly with government as opposed to working with private actors and so on. And that is why the DPA was formed, to make sure that we're not leaving any jobs on the table. But also one of the things that the DPA does is helps create and build capacity even of private recruitment agencies so that they understand how government could potentially support them to do this work better. So one of the things this committee could help us with is in securing funding to operationalize the Diaspora Placement Agency, so that we are able to do that work of labor, of facilitating Kenyans to enter the global labor market. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Kandi, let's keep it brief. There is a committee that is waiting outside with the Minister of Energy. And then, Honorable Kasal, you can introduce yourself. After Honorable Kandi.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Mine is on one question, because I think she said there is overlap, and she wants, the State Department wants us to appropriate money for establishing an agency placement agency. I am afraid because we have at the Ministry of Labor, NEA, I don't know, NEA or they have an agency already. So why should we establish another one at the State Department of Diaspora? Two, I am also afraid because the State Department is only concentrating too much on remittance, whereas we have also some serious Kenyans who they are experts in terms of, for example, engineering, because Kenya, we need some serious engineers to come and help us rather than relying on Chinese or Indians. What are you doing as State Department to get our original Kenyans? Because I know some who they want to come back and do something in this country. So what are you doing as a State Department to make sure that you tap that expert to come back and develop Kenya? Another one, what are you doing to make sure that, because there was that job fair from the Germans, already private recruiting agents are stealing from Kenyans. What are you doing to make sure that you warn Kenyans? They are already collecting money. I'm afraid to tell you that because already I got some information that my young people who came all the way from Baringo are being told that there is jobs already, so you come to Nairobi and you must pay some amount of money. What are you doing as a State Department to warn Kenyans against these rocky agencies?
PCS, for your information, Honorable Kandie lived and worked in Germany for more than 20 years. So he's very passionate about this diaspora business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I met him there and I realized he was more at home there than you can imagine.
Thank you, Chair. I think Kandie should be a member of parliament in Germany. I'm Irene Kasalu, MP Kitui County, and mine is to say that this department has done a fantastic job. I remember in your previous and one of your presentations, you mentioned that your return, I would not call it return on investment, return on the money that is allocated to you can be seen by what you are doing. So mine is to offer support and see much more what this department can do. Thank you, Chair.
Madam Pierce, in less than 5 minutes, if you respond.
We'll do my best. We'll do my best. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for the vote of confidence and for the support. We really rely on it to be able to do this work. And yes, we had made comments about how much it is that we're able to return from every shilling that is invested in the State Department for Diaspora Affairs. Honorable Kandie, the National Employment Authority has a very different mandate from the Diaspora Placement Agency. One of the things that the National Employment Authority does, it's a regulator. It regulates the space, specifically regulates, disciplines, registers, deregisters, blacklists, private recruitment agencies. The National Employment Authority sometimes helps with recruitment, but is not properly set up for that. It's largely a regulator. What the wisdom of setting up the Diaspora Placement Agency, which, by the way, was done in consultation with the Ministry of Labor during the creation of that global labor market strategy that I described earlier, was to form a fit-for-purpose agency whose entire job is not to regulate private recruiters, but is really to ensure that once agreements, for example, are signed, the DPA then is able to go and quote-unquote close the deal. It ensures that warm bodies of Kenyans are taking up the opportunities that are opening up in these countries. So we're not interested in regulating the space, as the DPA is not interested in regulating the space. It is interested in ensuring, let me give you an example of a trade agreement. Sometimes you might negotiate a trade agreement with the EU, for example, like we recently closed with the EPA, with the EU. It is one thing to negotiate an agreement. It is another thing to ensure that market access that has been granted is being taken up. How then do you ensure that farmers in Baringo are actually getting their produce into supermarkets in Belgium, for example. So that last mile, quote-unquote, connectivity is what the DPA is looking to do and is doing. We've structured a number of projects that are already working, such as the Mkulima Maju, which I know you're familiar with, that has had Kenyans taking up opportunities in these countries. And we again remember, because the DPA is a government agency, that it charges no fees to Kenyans who are looking for opportunities abroad. Some of the issues that you're discussing, where recruitment agencies sometimes do, as we know, do charge Kenyans for opportunities abroad, the DPA is not interested in charging Kenyans to help them find opportunities abroad, because this is the obligation of government, we think, to help Kenyans find job opportunities. So that the two agencies are complementary and are doing different things. So they are both needed. Let me speak to the question on recruitment agencies after the German affair that we spoke about. So again, let me say that we have time and again spoken to Kenyans about what a rogue recruitment agency looks like and what a legit agency looks like. I am not saying that every agency that charges fees is rogue, because in certain cases, employers abroad might not pay the recruiter to recruit Kenyans here. We believe, and the IOM standard is that the employer pays, and that is what we push, right? So that people who are looking for jobs are also not being asked to pay 500,000 shillings, 200,000 shillings, 1 million shillings to go to Australia or wherever. It is unconscionable. But what we have done consistently, and is something I think Bunga really can help us do, is share the list of licensed agencies who are always found on the NEA website. We share that list, and it's a list that is updated, so that whenever you're dealing with a recruitment agency, you know whether this is actually a recruitment agency, whether it has a current license, or whether it is a travel agency masquerading as a recruitment agency. A lot of the challenges we have seen and the distress that comes from Kenyans abroad has been from people who have been recruited by unlicensed agencies or travel agencies or other masqueraders pretending to be recruitment agencies who are therefore not licensed or regulated by NEA. So we have put out information on our various media channels, on TV, on radio, on our websites. Every time we go on media, this is something we emphasize. We speak about it at the job fairs and so on. Finally, Chair, to answer the question, we are not particularly committed to remittances in the way that you put it. In fact, even if you see our recently launched strategy or the diaspora policy, remittance is the last thing we talk about. Even in my presentation today, I spoke about the welfare of Kenyans and so on, and then we come to remittances because we know the diaspora is not an ATM. They're not a place where we go to get money. But we have an entire unit within the department that deals with skills, knowledge, and technology transfer, whose entire job is to think about what are these amazing skills, technologies, knowledges that the diaspora have, and what can we bring back. And some of the things that we have done with that, and it is a new project, admittedly, is with the IOM, we are working to bring back tech skills, for example. It's one of the skills that we've identified that diaspora can bring back. There is work in healthcare that is going on. So there is much work that is it's early days. It's being structured in terms of what we can do with the social, academic, and knowledge remittance, if I'm to use that word, with the diaspora, and I welcome you to also work with us to see how we can do more. Thank you, Chair.
PCS.
May I cede at least 2 minutes to Singoe, and then I'll.
Thank you very much, PCS, for your kind indulgence. Again, to come to the question posed by Honorable Hamisi, we are not unconscious of the competition presented by a number of countries. And to do that, we are focused on, number one, securing Kenya's anchor state status. And how do we do this without engaging in peace diplomacy. How can we do this without engaging in economic diplomacy that secures the country's economy? Number two, we are enhancing the place of Nairobi as the multilateral capital in the global south. Over the last 1 year, working very closely with the UN office in Nairobi, for example, we have secured $260 million for the construction of the biggest UN conference hall here at the UN complex. That will also help the country host more international conferences. Additionally, a hall for the holding of the UN General Assembly will be constructed in Nairobi, the very first time since the end of the Second World War, so to speak. So we are positioning Nairobi as the multilateral capital in the global south very deliberately. Thirdly, we are recontouring our missions as hubs for economic diplomacy. The entire orientation of our missions is shifting to focus on economic diplomacy. So over the last 6 months alone, I've held 2 conferences, regional conferences, with our ambassadors. Our ambassadors in Europe, our ambassadors in Asia, and now this weekend, our ambassadors in the Middle East, to focus on what are our strategies in Europe, what are our strategies in Asia, what are our strategies in Middle East in terms of investment, in terms of employment creation, okay, in terms of in terms of capital flowing back to Kenya. So we are very, very much focused on enabling our mission. Number 4, we are enhancing the capacity of foreign affairs infrastructure to advance the national interest. What I mean by this is that we have assets across over 40 missions that are not optimized. We have worked now and finalized a strategy with the National Treasury on leveraging on the PPP framework to unlock the potential of these assets so that the feel and look of our missions is up to global standards. That's number 1. Number 2, so that we can also save on the rental incomes or the rental expenditures that we are expending with regard to most of those missions. And number 3, this then becomes also a source of air in air, for our missions. Number 5, we are of course working very closely with the State Department of Diaspora and State Department of Labor to facilitate them to meet their targets with regard to labor migration, because of course they both leverage on the infrastructure that we have. And so, sir, I'd like to assure you that we are very, very much focused on securing the place of our country and its competitiveness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There may be 2 issues that I want to pick up. One is, I think it is important that we update this committee on the situation around Lebanon and to the extent that it affects Kenyans. So, Mr. Chairman, what I have here is it's a 2-page commentary, which I can maybe run through just some highlights, and then we leave it with the committee for further scrutiny. But basically, the update is that the situation has worsened, and we don't see it tempering down very soon. But since the conflict between Israel and the Lebanon, of course the Gaza side, we all know what has happened. It's in the public domain. But in terms of the recent escalation in Lebanon, so far there's indication that about 1 million people have now been displaced, and almost 1,873 deaths. So far, no Kenyan has been reported in this as a casualty. No Kenyan casualty has been reported. We also want to state that the department, the government, primarily here through the State Department for Diaspora, is part of a multi-agency committee involving other government agencies, and they have developed an evacuation plan which is now being implemented. The State Department for Diaspora Affairs is tasked with the issue of safeguarding the welfare and rights of Kenyans abroad. And we are working, as you may have heard Singoy say, this is a joint effort with the embassy in Kuwait, because we only have an honorary consul in Lebanon, where we had requested Kenyans to quickly register so that they can be assisted to get back to Kenya away from the conflict zone. So far, some evacuations have taken place. To date, we have received 3 cohorts who have come back from this conflict area, and we hope to receive about 4 to 5 other cohorts over the weekend, this weekend, of Kenyans being evacuated. The issue of travel documents is also being allayed so that some special arrangements can be made because they may not be able to get their documents now, to help them get back. And this requires also the psychosocial support and so forth that was needed. We also want to just point out that sometimes Kenyans take very long to appreciate that there's a challenge, because we have repeatedly indicated to Kenyans, one, that we want them to register. They were slow in this process. It's only after the war or the conflict has escalated that we see an avalanche of Kenyans now rushing to register. So it's something that we have to keep on working on. Because initially we had just about 1,000 or so who had registered. But as we speak now, out of the estimated 26,000 Kenyans in Lebanon, we have seen a sudden surge to about 7,000 now reporting to say that they want help to get out, but they were silent initially. We also still continue to face a situation where some Kenyans still find their own ways to Lebanon or to some of these conflict areas in spite of the repeated calls that this is not the time to get there. So it is something that we must jointly appeal to our Kenyans that what is happening there is not a game, it's not a joke, it is real, and they should avoid some of those areas. Kenyans in the south of Lebanon, there are contacts that have been put out there. They've been told to move away from the southern Lebanon to northern region where it is slightly safer as of now, but we don't know what may happen a little later. The Lebanese government has opened 875 safe shelters spread across Beirut, where most of the Kenyans are now sheltered. We have released some special support staff to go and help in processing these Kenyans as they face the challenges in Lebanon. Finally, I just want to say that it is important that Kenyans avoid any travel to some of the conflict-prone zones at this point in time. And we would be calling on the Fourth Estate in particular, the media and others, to really send this message to the Kenyans that they should not just walk into danger zones as we move forward. So I'll leave this with you, Mr. Chairman, the detailed aspect of it, for you to familiarize yourselves with as a committee. Let me pick up two quick issues. One, through you, Mr. Chairman, you shall be getting an invitation from us so that we can have a round table with this committee and also the Committee on Diaspora. And through you, we shall also be inviting maybe some representation from the Budget Committee so that we can have a round table and we can engage a little more on our foreign policy as it stands today and how we should be taking it up going forward based on the issues that have completely changed globally and regionally. And that maybe speaks to Amesi's question, that are we stuck in the old ways? We want the committees to assist us to get out of the old ways so that we can have some serious conversation on what are the global trends and how should we model our foreign policy. And this will then culminate in a sessional paper which will be placed before Parliament, the National Assembly, and you are the ones who will help, particularly in driving this aspect. So we want to seek your indulgence to be at this round table so that we walk the journey together. Finally, let me say that we have had some serious conversation on a diaspora bond. The resources are big, but we are now consulting with MIGA. This is the multilateral investment and guarantee agency of the World Bank, with the World Bank directly, with Treasury, Foreign Affairs, with Central Bank, so that we can raise resources. And the message we are getting is that we are now ripe for a very, very substantial and successful diaspora bond. It is estimated that if we do it right with all the consultation, we could raise anything close to $300 million US or $500 million US dollars. No, am I right? 300 billion Kenya shillings to 500 billion Kenya shillings through this process. And Mr. Chairman, this would then be focused to what could be critical infrastructure required in Kenya that has a serious multiplier effect. And that is the kind of conversation we want to be able to engage in. And there's every indication that this can be a successful bond. Just for people to note, Israel has been able to raise up to $50 billion out of their diaspora placements over the years. Now you can imagine Israel raising that kind of money. India has been able to raise up to $11 billion US dollars. Egypt and others, and it goes on. So for Kenya, we have an opportunity, and again, the support of this committee is going to be very, very essential in making sure that we can do that. That is the alternative way of raising resources, and I think it would be a moment of pride for Kenyans in the diaspora to be able to say that they funded that particular critical infrastructure in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, PCS, and your team. We really appreciate. On the point of retreat, you pulled out a question that I was about to pose to you, and we truly appreciate. Just so that you understand, recently there were challenges in one of the state departments that we oversight, and they called us for a 2-day retreat on, and going very detailed on the challenges that they are going through. It's a security department in nature, but they made sure that they showed us everything and the challenges they were going through. This committee wrote very aggressive letters to Treasury. But one of the issues was exchequer release. Before we got to Treasury, because we were going to have a meeting with Treasury, and we are lucky because you're not just an ordinary leader. You are a stakeholder in this government, so that you can leverage on that. So when we wrote those aggressive letters, and before it even reached them, the Ministry of the Treasury reached out to me personally and said, no, we understand what you're saying. We've reached out to the State Department, and we are sorting out their issues. So sometimes there are blockages that happen that, unless it is raised for people to appreciate, becomes a problem. Number two, you become a very easy target for cannibalism during our budget making process. Because like Honorable Amisi said, people don't really see the value of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because this PS was saying that you don't build roads, you don't connect electricity. So it's not tangible, and sometimes it's very easy to become a target of cannibalism during budget making process, and that is why, as a committee, we come in. So we've really insisted on this retreat so that we understand the challenges, which some of us know, but it is important that we bring it to ourselves and also to invite the budget committee to understand, so that when we are doing presentation before the budget committee, where many times we get challenges in explaining some of the issues, they understand beforehand, so that it becomes easy for this committee to support you. We understand the challenges that you go through. We really want to support you, but sometimes we have a problem in working on that. And then finally, that threshold of how much you can push, it becomes also an issue on the percentage that we can push as a committee to increase. And I've seen that state agency that I'm talking about has been able to canvass that situation so comfortably that Treasury is considering opening that window for them. That will also happen to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora Affairs, so that it becomes easy for you to execute your mandate. So we welcome it, and we will definitely be very excited to attend. Let us hear the challenges, because other than oversighting new PCS, it's important also that we appreciate your challenges and become your advocates on the floor and before the Budget Committee. With that, we appreciate and thank you very much for joining us. Asanteni.